The Counter-Strike franchise, simply put, is a masterpiece. A game that, at its essence, is a simple, repetitive construct, but in reality is one of the most innovating and genre-defining games of all time. This is the story of Counter-Strike, the game that never dies. To understand where the franchise started, we have to go all the way back to 1999, a year which changed the course of gaming forever. Back in 1999, Half-Life had become a huge success, with its immersive storytelling, phenomenal pacing and its stellar graphics. Half-Life would go on to become one of the biggest hits in the whole of gaming, winning just over 50 Game of the Year awards, and is often considered to be one of the most influential FPS games of all time. In Half-Life, people could customize and create their own maps, and it was through this map editor that the roots of CSGO would be planted. Two developers, Jesse Cliff and Min Lee, would go on to create the first ever map of Counter-Strike, using Half-Life's pre-existing engine, Gold Source. It's estimated that the two spent over 2 months of programming creating the first beta of the game, along with Jesse Cliff creating an official website for the newly founded game. Over time, the game gradually began to draw more attention, and by 2000, and after the release of the 5th beta, Valve had seen potential in the mod, and hired Jess Cliff and Min Lee to continue their work. After this, Valve bought the intellectual property of Counter-Strike, and released, together with Lee and Cliff, the first non-beta version in September 2000 on PC. After the release of Counter-Strike 1.6, the already growing fanbase was increasing rapidly, the rise was exceptional, and Counter-Strike was being played all around the world. In the whole of gaming, something like Counter-Strike, a game so simple yet so innovative and amazing, had been unheard of. Multiplayer had existed prior to Counter-Strike, but the way Counter-Strike's multiplayer was utilised was completely new, and would be the foundation for the future of multiplayer games. The thing about Counter-Strike was that it wasn't inherently a complicated game. In fact, it was far from that. The simplicity of the game attracted both casual fans looking for a fun, immersive game to enjoy, but also hardcore fans who would play hundreds and hundreds of hours mastering the game. And the quote, "easy to learn, hard to master," pretty much sums up the game. As stated before, Counter-Strike was completely unique, and many of the traits first created in Counter-Strike can be seen all throughout the gaming industry. Realistic recoil patterns for guns, payment systems, multiple objectives, respawns, all became a core foundation of the game, and with that, a pivotal foundation of the new age of FPS games. Another great thing about Counter-Strike was the fact that it was a community-driven game, a game where the community interacted. If a map was a particularly well-made one, more people played it. If a map was not a particularly well-made one, less people played it. Organically creating, balancing and distributing them. A game made by the people, for the people. The huge rise of Counter-Strike was almost unprecedented, and along with that, the potential. As the game had become a huge success, attracting a huge fanbase and therefore making a huge sum of money, the developers saw opportunities to grow and do even more with the game. After the initial success of Counter-Strike, as hardware and technological advancements were made, ambition became ideas, and them ideas became reality. In 2004, a single-player game titled Counter-Strike Condition Zero was released. Unfortunately for Valve, the game was a huge failure, and a majority of fans were extremely disappointed. While the future of Counter-Strike seemed to look bleak, this failure was just a beginning which would explode Counter-Strike to levels unprecedented and shock the entire gaming industry. In November 2004, Half-Life 2, a sequel to the legendary original, was released, and along with this, a sequel to Counter-Strike, Counter-Strike Source. The game had the same mechanics, same gameplay, but in a new, polished and superior engine to that of Gold Source. Although Counter-Strike 1.6 would remain popular, especially with the older fanbase, Counter-Strike Source would far surpass that of 1.6, and become the forefront of the future of Counter-Strike. Around this time, esports become more and more popular, with organizations, players and fans becoming major forces in the entertainment industry, as the profits made from esports marked the beginning of a new era. In 2006, Intel Extreme Masters, short for IEM, stood out amongst all the organizations and became a staple in the Counter-Strike esports, making Counter-Strike an international competitive esport. IEM would go on to assemble the very best teams and the very best players all around the world into a league, where the truly elite players of the game competed on a stage in front of thousands. To this day, IEM is still one of the most popular Counter-Strike competitions in the world. As the years passed and the stages kept getting bigger and bigger, Counter-Strike Source finally began to look outdated despite Valve's effort with continuous updates. The technological advancements had yet again improved, and to combat this, Valve needed something new, a game which was modern, new, while still having the classic Counter-Strike mechanics. Luckily, Valve didn't waste any time, and started production on the game we all know and love, CSGO. Counter-Strike Global Offensive started development in 2010, and was released 2 years later in 2012. Through community feedback, Valve knew precisely what the fans wanted and how to to achieve it, and thus produced a game which is true to the classic Counter-Strike core, but also fresh and modern. CSGO was true to its predecessors, but was made for a modern world, and would go on to become the biggest game in the history of esports and competitive gaming. The great thing about Counter-Strike is that ever since its start with Lee and Cliff, and eventually Valve, they always knew that the most pivotal part of the entire game was the community, and the feedback that they got. They helped turn the game into what it is today, growing it organically, always giving feedback and creating innovative maps and skins. After several iterations and thousands of updates, Counter-Strike is as relevant as ever. The fans are loyal, the players amongst the best and the viewership still rising. 8 years after the release of CSGO and 21 years after the original Counter-Strike 1.6, the game is still one of the most popular esports games ever, being only surpassed by Dota 2 in revenue. Counter-Strike has influenced countless amounts of games and touched millions upon millions of gamers, whether it be casual or hardcore fans. In many ways, it's a perfect game, a perfect balance of user-friendliness, competitiveness, and the embodiment of easy to learn, hard to master. No matter what will happen, the legendary legacy of Counter-Strike will always remain, and the phenomenal game will be played for generations to come.